S.P. Nistades is a fantastic and versatile composer whose work spans across film, television, and much more, from fantasy series such as Dragon Age Redemption, starring Felicia to darker thrillers like The Wicked. Peace has established himself as a deeply versatile and emotionally driven composer. With projects constantly on his plate, there is no shortage of great music coming out from his terrific studio, where we are sitting right now, and we are about to discuss some of his most recent work. Thank you, Peace, so much for inviting me here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been very busy since the last time we did an interview. So many great projects, but a recent one you did was The Wicked, a horror thriller that came out earlier this year that you co-scored with Joseph Loduca. I think horror is a genre that presents composers with a pretty great, fun challenge. In your opinion, what makes a good horror score, and what did you try to do musically for The Wicked?
Well, a lot of my favorite horror scores have a really distinct tone and a feel that really gets under your nerves. You know, that what's great, I think, with horror as a genre is that you can really play with tone. You can really set the tone, like, you know, with films like Rosemary's Baby.
Absolutely,
you know,
yeah.
And The Shining is, you know, one of my favorite of the genre. And I think, you know, we were talking earlier about different horror scores and that I like, and one of my favorite recently, although this was a few years ago now, is Johan Soderquist's score for Let the Right One In.
Yeah, of course.
Mainly because it was such a different score. You know, it's also a different film.
Yeah.
And it's I don't see it very much as a horror film, actually. I see it a little bit more as a coming of age story with interesting things.
Kind of like horror elements
that happen. But I love the light and the dark in that film and that score. And I just, you know, I think like with any genre, you know, I think you can really establish great themes and get to play with the duality. And that's something I love about the horror genre. Is that you can and you know, you can really have that duality of the character going insane psychologically, or on the flip side, it could also be supernatural, and that's a duality that I find doesn't really happen in a lot of other genres.
Yeah,
you know, it does. You know, usually you don't really, you know, and that's what I like about this is that you can approach it from possibly different subtexts and different you know, from a character standpoint, from a horror monster type thing, or, you know, these different approaches. In the case of The Wicked, well, you know, the case of The Wicked was really interesting for me also because I collaborated with the composer Joseph Loduca.
It was fantastic, yeah.
Fantastic composer and a really wonderful guy. It was really great fun to get to work with him on the score for The Wicked. And what we really wanted to do, it's a wonderful old-fashioned type monster film. You know, there's in this case it's a witch. Yeah. But it's a wonderful take, I think, on that genre. And we really, there's a lot of music. There's a lot of music in the film. And we really wanted to try to build a thematic thread through it, and Joe and I really worked together a lot on that, and we collaborated because he was in Michigan,
right, where he lives
and works, and I was here, and we spotted the film with Peter, our director, here at my studio, and then linked Joe in, and we discussed a lot of the scenes, and you know, in this particular case, we sort of divided up some of the work, but really stayed in collaboration in terms of the themes and the ideas. And I wrote a few of the themes, and he wrote a few of the themes, and then we got to really intermingle them. And
would you like share your work with each other and kind of like, hey, this is what I'm working on right now, what are you working on? So you guys kind of knew, or did you not know until it was kind of like time to present the final mixes and stuff?
No, we really we sent back and forth ideas of things, and of course, but it was also a very, very short post-production time for us. I think I had about 28 days.
Wow.
And there was about 80 something minutes of music.
That's a lot of music.
It's a lot of music. It was a lot of music. And we were really sort of flying through the reels. It's actually quite, it was, this is really a testament, I think, to Peter and his team that he pulls together. A lot of the team was actually people that I'd worked with on Dragon Age. Our wonderful Joe, another Joe Zuban, our mixing engineer, our dubbing engineer dubbed Dragon Age, and Rob Noakes. We were all part of that original team, and so it's really great when you get to come on board a project that you already know everyone,
right?
And there's a trust, and there's a dialogue that you already have, and that was really something we really relied upon on The Wicked because of the schedule. There was very little time to do what I guess conventionally one would do, where you would play. So play the thing. You would play it for Peter, go back and forth, and and then record the score in a traditional sense,
right.
Mix it, and then deliver it. We didn't really have a lot of time for that, and so and being the wonderful and really great director that Peter is, we really focused on the themes, and that's really what Peter wanted. Was just thematic scoring, themes that can really carry an audience through this really crazy adventure that these teenagers go through in the forest, as one does. But and so we really sat down, and I wrote a 15, 17-minute suite.
Wow.
At the beginning of, of course we were all aware of the time schedule, but I always really enjoy starting off like that. For me, starting off with kind of, to me, I approach it similar, I guess, to how a screenwriter would write, where he would come up with a treatment of the script.
Kind of like a generalization sketch of it, everything.
A sketch of the different acts and what would be what, and generally what is going on in this thing. And to have that skeleton. Mm-hmm. And that's really how I approached, and how we approached the score, was for me to write and establish the sound of this. What exactly is this going to sound like? Thematically, what is it going to be? And I played that for Peter, and I think the first reel I scored was reel 5, which I believe was the last reel. And I scored that whole reel because that was the big ending.
That big climax.
And Joe was working mainly on reel 1 at the time, and so we sort of did the opening and ending, and then basically reels 2, 3, and 4, Peter heard pretty much at the dub, because, like I said, there is just very little time.
Right, so you're just cranking it out.
So it was very, and I had a phone call with Peter about that. It was of how do we how can we figure this out, and he really gave me the vote of confidence on that one. He said,
you figure it out.
Look, well, he said, look, I've worked with you, we've worked before, and I trust you, so go and do it, and go, and don't worry about running every entire little detail, because we really we need to get it to the dub on time. Yeah. But having said that, he had already approved the themes. The DNA of the score was set. Okay. So we knew, and that would have been very strange if we didn't have that set. Yeah. And that's really, because he's really the captain of our ship.
The director.
And you really want to feel like you have the trust, yet at the same time the freedom to get to explore, and that's something Peter gave me very much on Dragon Age and very much on The Wicked, is that freedom and that nurturing aspect of let's just try it and see if it works.
That's great for collaborative freedom, and just I think it's a great environment to have that collaborative kind of continuation and freedom between a director and a composer.
Very much so, yeah.
And so you also did, completely on a different other end of spectrum, you did a score to a feature called Rock Jocks, which stars Andrew Bowen, Felicia Day, Doug Jones. This isn't the first time you're scoring Felicia's acting. She did Dragon Age Redemption. So how'd you get involved with this film? Was it through Felicia? And then how did you formulate a sci-fi comedy sound for, and that's crazy kind of a genre, and comedy, I think, is the hardest thing to do.
It's extremely tough. And it was very, very hard.
Yeah.
It was very hard. It's funny because Dragon Age was a really wonderful start in terms of the world of meeting Felicia and meeting Peter, and I actually was approached about Rock. Well, I met the producers for Rock Jocks at the premiere of Dragon Age. Because I believe it was around, by the time we premiered it, I don't remember if they had shot a lot of it or they were currently shooting, but they were already in the works on that. And at the time I heard that there was somebody else attached from a composer standpoint, and so we just met and we had a wonderful chat, and they had really enjoyed Dragon Age and what I'd done on that score. And then I think it was like a few months later, I got a call and
the call
as one does, and they said, "Can we talk?" And so I said, "Sure, let's talk." And they actually sent me a cut of the film with absolutely no music. It was completely silent, which is always the preferred method.
A welcome but rare thing.
Rare. Fortunately, I've been quite fortunate. A lot of the filmmakers I've worked with tend to allow me that freedom and tend to. I believe that at least even from the Wicked standpoint, I don't remember if there was any temp music, but I don't think I heard any of it, if there was. But on Rock Jocks, so I saw the film for the first time, and it was completely silent, and that's really fun. It was really fun to get to, because sometimes ideas start bubbling.
Yeah.
And it was actually really wonderful because the theme, when I finished watching the film, I had heard this melodic idea for the ending, for the theme at the end of the film. And so I ran over to the piano and sort of, and this was before I got the job, so I just wrote it down anyway, just in case, because, and that's one of the reasons I do my big sweet things, is it, apart from being a treatment, in a sense, the structure of the score, it's also a very important diary entry for me, because my first initial unbiased, thought through necessarily emotional response to the film is usually very precious. Not necessarily that it will make it into the final film or not, but just precious to have. That original. You're an outsider watching this film, and so. Interestingly, that theme that I scribbled on the paper at the end of that screening became the main theme for Rock Jocks later on, which was really fun to get to take that idea and really explore that. And in terms of the sci-fi comedy aspect of it, it's a very tricky balance, because. And I think that's what's, the thing with comedy too is everybody comes to it from a very different perspective, because comedy can be very referential, or I like to call it referential in the sense of, it's referring a specific culture or a specific, in this particular case, there's a lot of sci-fi references, so if you've never seen a sci-fi film, which is probably quite rare. But if for some reason you haven't, it may not translate very well. And also from a language standpoint. And we really had a lot of discussions about this during the scoring of it as to how we were going to approach this. Because from a genre perspective, there's two very specific styles that is part of the film, which is this very sort of kind of dry office-like atmosphere
Uh-huh.
to mainly the first part of the film, the first act and a half or so. And then we very sort of gradually transition into this exciting sci-fi intergalactic thing at the end of the film, without giving too much away. So it's so we really but the thing that I was very concerned about and very much wanting to do in that particular film was to really establish the seeds of thematic ideas earlier in the film, so that once things start to come to fruition, that's there. But like I said, it's very tricky because you've got this more dry sense of comedy earlier in the film, which doesn't necessarily accommodate massive amounts of thematic scoring at the beginning. But fortunately, and it was really fun actually working with Paul, our director, and really just really playing with it. I really had a lot of fun with him in a sense that I don't get on a lot of films, which is that I almost felt like we were co-composing it.
Wow.
In many ways, because obviously I had come up with the thematic ideas and musically sort of what I'd like to do with it.
Yeah.
But then we really sort of worked on it together, and he would be right next to me and he'd be going, "Oh yes, can we let's do this, let's try this here, and let's and I would come up with my thing, and we'd really sort of collaborate very strongly, which and I haven't done an immense amount of comedy. But it was really fun to get to do that and to get to really experience it together.
Right.
And we really had a lot more time to do that. Interestingly, it was right back to back with The Wicked.
So you finished The Wicked and then
so
go straight to
I
Rocco.
jumped right onto that.
Wow.
In fact, I started writing I had already started developing ideas before I got on Wicked. And then basically the ending suite, the big sci-fi thing, and the what I call the father and son theme. It's been a while, so I'm sort of recounting my experiences. But there was, what was really nice about it is that despite the comedy and despite the sci-fi, there's a wonderful human story that's part of it. And I think that's really the best ingredient to any film, regardless of genre, is to have that human journey.
Absolutely.
That journey, and this was really, and certainly for me, it was a journey about a father who wanted to be with his son.
Right.
It's just that he goes through all sorts of bizarre, comedic, and quite interesting obstacles to do that. But it's about that. And so that really was the seed for me of the score.
Wow.
Was finding that emotional thing, and then because the comedy can take care of itself a lot of the time.
It usually comes from like the performance.
The performances being very timely in timing.
Right, the editing and everything.
Yeah, and of course music as well. But and we had a great cast. Felicia's fantastic. She's very funny, and she's a wonderful actor. And we had Doug Jones, again, who I had worked with on Dragon Age, and he played our wonderful alien. As he does, who was really wonderful. Really, I got to write a fun theme for him. He had a really fun thing. And we had Justin Chon, who I think recently was in 21 and Over, I believe was the film that he was in, and we had lots of a wonderful ensemble. It was really an ensemble picture, so that was really a lot of fun to do, but balancing that was really tricky.
I can imagine. It
was really tricky, but when you have a good team around you and when you can trust your filmmakers, it helps a lot.
It makes for a much better environment.
Yes.
Another recent short film he did was Night Vet, which stars James Cromwell. So when you're scoring a film that's kind of heavily focused on characters more so than, genre is not the kind of calling card of this film. You're more interested in the characters and the plot. So where does your inspiration come from specifically for something like a project like this? What really influenced your music? What do you draw from the most?
Well, for Night Vet was a really fun project. I love James Cromwell, as everybody does, and I met Julie, who's the director of the film, quite early in her process of the film, as I like to try to do if possible. And it was actually a case of I actually met her at a screening, at one of these award screenings time last year. Actually, it was Anna Karenina. We sat next to each other at Anna Karenina, and we both enjoyed the film quite a bit, and got chatting, and as one does in screenings. Not during the film, but
get kicked out.
But yes, exactly. But during while you're there, and it was one of those conversations of what do you do, etc. And I'm a composer. Oh, I'm looking for a composer for my next film, and that's really fun when that happens. And so we became good friends. And she had given me the script. Very early on. This was, I think, she was planning to do it, and I'd read the script and I really enjoyed. Interestingly, this is another quirky sort of drama comedy.
Right.
Again, it has a wonderful blend of two genres. One could say of the drama aspect of it and the comedy side. Right. But again, I think Julie did a wonderful job of balancing that and creating a world that is very, because Night Vet takes place over one night.
Yeah.
And that's always fun. It's always fun when you can sort of be with the characters for one small period of time.
Right.
And not spanning, years and years and years. Although that's wonderful too in a different way. But anyway, so this was a really fun. Comedic experiment. In terms of inspiration, we both love Henry Mancini.
Oh wow!
We really did, and we really do, and I would say he was one of my main inspirations for the score, because there's a bit of a throwback feel to it. Certainly for me. And we really discussed a lot about the idea that this was a type of film that you don't get to see a lot anymore. It's not dark. It's not monsters coming and destroying the planet. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful style. But no, this was a really nice sort of. It really felt, and we, I think independently, neither of us told the other. Beforehand that this was, she didn't say, oh, can we do something like that? She just, said again, I think most of the films we've talked about today, again, it didn't have temp.
Yeah, a lucky guy.
And partially, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was on board before they shot the film.
Yeah, that definitely.
I believe it was before they shot the film, and so we had lots of lunches and lots of discussions as to what the music could be, and I ended up, they were doing a big campaign, a teaser for, which was really fun actually, really well shot, and Jamie was in it, James Cromwell was in it, and he plays the wonderfully charismatic Dr. Evergood. And so I had scored that. I had scored the that original campaign, that teaser that they had done. And so I'd already sort of worked out a few ideas in that that carried over into the score. But we knew we wanted, again, really thematic. We wanted, because the heart of the film is really a journey. It's a journey of discovery for this woman, who goes into this vet, and it changes her life in many ways. But it's a journey of rediscovery for her character, and that's really the arc that we wanted to play with, and the emotion and the human aspect. So and again, I think regardless of genre, that even though, like you say, this is more it allows you to be more close to that aspect of it. But regardless, any film that that you do, I think it's so important to find that what does the film mean? What is the heart of the film, and not necessarily the A plot, if you will. That will take care of itself. People will know, what happens. It's already there. But I think one of the jobs that music can do quite well is, when done well, is to try and help bring forth or highlight or, embody the spirit of the film in whatever story it is.
Right.
So that was very much the score of that. Again, I wrote the main theme was written before I ended up scoring the film. I'd seen the film. I'd seen a rough cut, but like I say, I like to start off developing, because it's a reaction when you're scoring, when I'm scoring certainly.
Right.
A lot of it, because I've done the classical training. I love classical music. I love lots of different styles of music. But I feel like personally, for me, it cannot be a calculated thing. For me, it cannot be a, I'm doing, such and such a chord because we're doing this such and such a scene.
Right.
It really has to be, for me, for it to mean anything to me, it has to be an emotional response.
Right.
And an emotional reaction to the film.
Right.
And so I love to be able to either read the script or watch the film, depending on what stage I come in to the film on, and just sort of get to close my eyes and think about it and feel.
Right.
What am I feeling?
Absolutely.
And that's usually the starting point. And that certainly was the case with this. And it was very moving for me, and I don't think Julie will mind me telling this little story, but I had written what is the main theme of the film. And it was just something I was playing around. It became the main theme. I was still playing around with it. And Julie came over at one point, and I played it for only on the piano because I hadn't mocked it up or anything. Because in this particular case, I knew that the main thing had to be that melodic thing. Right. And not, and you can get very lost playing with fun sounds. And so I really, I just wrote it on the piano. And so she came over and I played it to her on the piano. And then I turned around and she was drying her eyes. And I was very moved. And that became the theme for the film. And the rest of it was very, very, very different. Because the rest of it was very... there's two characters musically in the film. There's the fun, quirky, quite frazzled musical thing that accompanies our main character, and then there's the heart of it, the change, the transformation, which is the theme I just described to you, that I wrote at the time, and that came first, and then we went into the stuff, and the comedy was really fun because it's you have such wonderful actors, and the rest of the cast is fantastic, and I was just at the screening of the film recently, a few weeks ago, and it was really nice to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, all finished.
All finished, and it was great. It was a really wonderful response, and I'm glad the audience really responded to it.
That's good.
Because that's it's such a more so I think than other genres. Comedy is it's really terrible when nobody laughs at what you're hoping to do. You go, oh good God, what happened? What did we do? But it was great, and I think the audience loved it. So that was really nice.
That's good.
Yeah. Really nice.
You also scored a Western short called "What Have I Done?" and Westerns are my favorite genre. So how did you craft your own Western score under a genre that holds so many archetypes, so many expectations, especially when it comes to the music? You have greats like Morricone and Steiner and just like people who have defined the genre for the entire history of film. So where do you even begin? Well,
What Have I Done was a really fun, I keep saying that, really fun project.
Well,
it really was. It was, and it was extremely unexpected.
Yeah.
You see, because it was one of the few films that I did that I was not intended to score the film. Because I've done over the years, sometimes I would collaborate with filmmakers from a sonic standpoint, from a sound design, from a sound standpoint,
Right.
and I would help contribute to that side of the film. And that's how this film came to me. Was they didn't have an actual score. He had a lot of original music that was sort of written for the film, for different parts of the film, and that was how it was supposed to be. And I was supposed to come in and help with the sound and stuff. But as I can tend to do, I get very invested in the film.
Right.
And as I was working on the sound and whatnot, and I kind of had a little idea. I said, this to myself.
Yeah.
I'm hearing this thing that I think could be nice, because, again, that film is a wonderful story of finding oneself, and it again after a traumatic event, and that's the heart of the film. There's lots of fun elements to the film, but that was the heart of the film for me. Was a character who was lost, a character who was lost emotionally, and had to find himself, or had to go through this journey of rediscovery, of finding who you are and where you belong. And that's, I was just having this conversation the other day. It's a subject of which I find that I relate to very much, particularly the where do I belong bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little bit, a child of multiple, mainly two I have a lot of dichotomies,
right.
I guess, in my life. I have, I grew up in a very Western, in a very European / American community, and yet I'm originally from Thailand. All this kind of, so I have all these dichotomies. I grew up classical music, but I love modern stuff as well. And finding, that, and I think not to divert too much into a psychological analysis session here, but it really plays a big part of relating to that kind of story. So anyway, as I said, I was working on the sound, and one night I think I'd taken a break, and I was just hearing something. I was actually running some errands, and I heard something. And so I started playing around with it that evening, and ended up I still have the score. In fact, that whole score I hand wrote, which never happens anymore. And I did not plan to do that. It just was how it turned out to be. So I had scribbled the thing. It was, just the melody and the chords and stuff on a piece of score paper at the piano, and I believe it was, and I played it under a few scenes, because there are a few scenes in the film that I felt, this would be really nice, I think, if there could be this hymn. And that really was, in terms of going back to the approach you had asked about, the approach, that really was my approach, was to write a hymn, sort of a southern hymn. And I had grown up with that too, and so it does really move me, and there is a lot of sort of this slightly religious element in the film anyway, and so it worked very, very well. And so like I said, I played around with this idea, and I had synced it to picture, and because of the way everything was set up, I did not do it. The whole score was done not to click, which is why it was handwritten, and which is how we recorded it. Because it was just me playing with the scene, it was me playing, because there's a lot of dialogue too in the film, and so it was just that response that we talked about, that responding to his character, and it was really interesting too, because the director was the main actor. He played the main actor. He was an actor director, and so I've gotten to know Bob, who's our director, through obviously working on it, and here he was on the screen playing this character. It's a very emotional scene in a graveyard, and he had this discussion, kind of with himself about this. And so I played that hymn that I'd written the night before to the picture, and Bob came over, and I was a little bit scared of playing it to him with the picture, because I I don't remember. I can't remember if there was music there or if there wasn't any music there.
So you might have overstepped something else that was already there.
I can't remember exactly. But anyway, so I said to him, well, Bob, I have this thing I want to play for you. Just see what you think. And so I went to the piano and I played him the theme. And he he actually started to tear up again. I don't mean to overdo this tearing up thing.
Well, that's a good thing for a composer.
But he was very moved by it. And I said, oh, well, that's great. I've also played it up against one of the scenes in the film. And so I then walked over here to my desk and played that scene for him.
Uh-huh.
And he really liked it. And so I ended up scoring a lot of the rest of the film. But there, like I say, there's a lot of other pieces of music that were already there, and it was for me on that film, it was much more about the main contribution that I brought to the table was that hymn.
Mm-hmm.
There was other underscore for other bits of the film, but it was all basically that hymn, because what I was trying to find with that was to find again that heart,
right,
and that arc in the story that could define his journey,
right.
And so that became what that score became.
Well, it's amazing how it starts with kind of a simple idea and just kind of a
yeah. And well, it was interesting too, because like I say, that wasn't what I was supposed to do. So, but see, I think that's what great collaborators do with each other, is that we're just throwing things around and going, well, what can we try?
Right.
Could this be something that could be useful?
See what sticks. Really.
See what works or what doesn't. And Bob was very open to ideas and very open to but having a firm idea of what it is that he was trying to tell and what story it was. And so that was was really I particularly loved. I remember before that what Carter Burwell did on True Grit,
right,
and with the solo piano hymn thing,
right,
which was very, very moving to me,
yes,
and very different as
Absolutely,
well, and that approach to me worked very well for what we were doing, in the sense that there's a lot of other big things going on, but what was the heart of the film,
right,
and it was about a person who was really sort of ostracized, his character, he was sort of misunderstood and ostracized in his community, and so he was one person against this whole thing, and so the solo piano thing was very appropriate. It seemed very appropriate for the film.
Uh-huh.
And so it was a very, very small scope.
Yeah.
Very, at one point we had a fiddler as well, and a little bit of guitars, but for the most part it was the solo piano and a few sort of ambient things that I had put together as well.
Oh.
But it was a fun project. It was a fun project.
I mean, it's been a busy time for you. But are you working on anything right now that you can speak of? Any projects that are in the works that can be shared?
Yes, well, it's actually a wonderful time at the moment where there's quite a lot of things going on. I'm at it's funny. The other thing that was interesting this year was I'd been asked by this wonderful company in London, Altitude Music, with their new project Must Save Jane, to create a few trailer pieces for that. And so I was very, of course, honored, and I said, yeah, sure, let's do that. So I actually spent 2 months recording 3 trailer pieces, well, writing and recording.
Right.
I think we had 12 hours of ethnic percussion and 7 hours of drums and things. It was a lot. It was a lot to do, but it was really fun. It really felt like scoring 3 little films.
Yeah.
Because that's what I try to do in the piece. In each piece is to create a little narrative story. In the trailer, and I think that's what good trailers do.
Oh, absolutely.
They create that sense of environment of the thing. So anyway, I'm working on a new project right now for them, for the new album that they're putting together right now. I just started recently on working with a wonderful fashion designer on her new campaign. for her new collection, through a friend of mine, through a filmmaker friend of mine who had worked on the had directed the campaign, and he had approached me and said, would you be interested in doing this? And I've only done one other fashion thing, but many years ago we did I think it was the fall winter collection for a French fashion designer, and we did some fun stuff on that. And so and I love that world. I do enjoy that.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
That world. Yeah, so it was really great. And she was here the other day, the fashion designer, Emily. Her name's Emily, Emily Dacare, and her new line is wonderful. It's very, very beautiful. It's very classic, but quite sort of edgy a little bit, and I really love her her look. What she does with it, and that's really fun, because I feel in many ways it's really what we try to do in film, is we try to capture the sound of the film,
right? The
sound of this story. What is the sound of the story? And that's basically what we're doing with the fashion thing, with her line, is what is the sound of this world that she's created so beautifully with clothes,
right? And
what can that sound be? And so it really isn't that different, really.
I know, that's a really cool parallel.
Scoring film, it's really fun to get to just discover this sound. And she came down here the other day. We had a wonderful meeting, and it turned into, I think she ended up being here for 7 hours. And it was funny because it was supposed to be a sort of a couple hour meeting or whatever, and I think she left at like midnight. Because we just had such a great time, throwing ideas around and just chatting. And anyway, so I'm working on that one, and I'm very, very glad to be back on board with my wonderful Swedish directing duo, Andre Hedetoft and Andreas Clement, and their new film, Double Trouble, which also happens to be a sci-fi romance comedy.
Sci-fi romance comedy. It'll be a breeze.
It's yes. I'm currently staring at the page, going, "What the heck am I doing?" Quite literally.
Blank page syndrome.
But again, I just like a day or two ago, I just had a wonderful Skype meeting with them, and again with both of these guys, I worked with them on Logan earlier this last year, and I did the Pixel Skåne Film Festival video with them, and it's a relief. I mean, in one sense, to work with filmmakers that you can really trust,
right? And
I really trust them. I really trust their judgment, and their and I think that the worst thing for any composer, I think, is when you're working with a director that you don't feel you can trust. You're not sure of what it is that they're doing, or what they want you to be doing, etc. But I worked with them, like I say, on Logan last year when they approached me for that, and it was just fantastic, and I and just that energy of showing them something and them saying, well, that's great, but what about this? And you're like, well, that just made the score better, and the film better too. And I think that's the type of collaborators that one would love to work with, and one would hope to get to work with is collaborators that not only make the film better, but make you better and make your work better, and eat with each other, and I've been very lucky to be able to work with such wonderful filmmakers. So that's we have that, and we have a few other things on the horizon.
Well, that sounds like exciting times ahead. So
yes, it'll be a fun year.
Absolutely, 2014, and we'll have to talk about that too when all that stuff comes together.
Yes,
but Peace, thank you so much for inviting me here in your beautiful studio, and for taking the time to talk about your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.